Ghost threw himself forward in one swift movement, dodging the piercing attack from the monster. He rolled onto the ground and turned himself quickly, firing a shot with his Desert Eagle into the creature's eye, which roared as it was hit. The ancient's eyes widened slightly, and his body acted again as the monster's tail attacked him. A quick and lethal attack so strong that it destroyed the concrete of the wall behind the man. The monster turned its body quickly and struck the ancient with its huge hand, causing the man to fly several meters forward and grunt as he was hit. Ghost fell to the ground a few times, feeling enormous pain throughout his stricken area. He looked down, his eyes analyzing the twisted arm in the unusual way. It had broken, which was great, but it had dislocated. He quickly grabbed his fist and tried to put his arm back in place, ignoring the blood that was dripping from his stained head. Footsteps approached quickly from behind him, and he saw Sherry crouching down from out of the corner of the eye. "Are you all right?" she asked, nervous in both the fact that they were trapped with such a monster and the fact that he was injured. Without answering immediately, Ghost stood up with a grunt and took a clip from his pocket from his tactical vest, handing it to the girl without looking at her. "Reload and get out of here." Sherry took the clip and reloaded the pistol in her hands. Then she looked at him as if he were crazy. "What? No way!" she exclaimed, hearing the monster roar again, and moved quickly towards them. However, after Ghost simply pushed her aside, she realized that the creature was focused solely on him. It hadn't as if it ever was there. That was strange to say the least. "This isn't a discussion. To get out of here, you only will get in my way," he shouted back, running a few steps towards the creature, throwing himself down as it attacked him under its legs. The monster quickly turned around and trying to attack the agent. However, a familiar roar echoed throughout the room. Both Ghost and Sherry were surprised to see Lickers attacking the creature. Two of them jumped on its back and attacked it with their claws. However, the monster simply grabbed him and threw him towards the agent, who started running towards Sherry to get out of there. In reflex, he ducked and focused his eyes on the monster that was now advancing towards him, even with the liquor still on its back. Sherry's eyes widened slightly as she saw the liquor monster had thrown to start to move again. She raised the silver ghost and fired at the creature, which struggled as the higher caliber shots began to hit it. A noise from next to her caught the attention on reflex. Sherry jumped backwards, dodging the piercing advance from the number liquor, attracted by her shots. The girl fired at the creature, which leapt towards the ceiling and began to run as it dodged. The liquor had previously shot and ran towards her, jumped as to ready to attack her. Quickly, Sherry threw herself to the ground and slid under the creature, fired rapidly at both the creatures that were now running towards her. She fired as she retreated, and managed to bring one of them down, killing it. However, she ran out of ammo again, and the liquor flexed its behind legs to attack again. However, Sherry was quicker and lunged forward, turning her body and landing a kick to the side of the creature's head before it could attack her. She quickly grabbed her knife and jumped on top of the liquor, stabbing it in the head several times until it was motionless. She breathed a sigh of relief and soon stood up, only to find herself racing 3 or more creatures coming down from the hole at the monster fighting the agent had opened earlier. She drew her knife again, only to have the forearm grabbed by the tongue of one of the liquors. Her eyes widened as she saw another one leapt towards her. "Sherry!" The agent's deep voice caught her attention, and all she could see was his Desert Eagle flying towards her. Adrenaline was coursing through her veins as she managed to grab the gun, while it was still in the air, and fired at the liquor shortly after it jumped towards her. She then fired at the one holding her, and it was the last one. The girl gasped a few times, feeling a certain relief spread through her chest. She was getting more action in just a few hours than any day of work she had ever done. The sound of the agent fighting the creature made her look towards him with the Desert Eagle raised. She raised the way he moved, so unique, yet so familiar, and it was only then she had realized he had called her by her name. She hadn't told him her name once, so how did he know? She shook her head. She would have to think about it later. Approaching it at a fast pace, she shot the creature in the eye, causing the monster to take a few steps away from the man. Ghost fired at his rifle at the creature, which was now protecting the eye of the shoulder, with its arm as it approached at a fast pace. As soon as he got close enough, the creature attacked him. However, Ghost threw himself forward and let himself slide under the monster's legs. Reacting quickly, he didn't give the creature time to turn towards him and jumped on its back, climbing onto its shoulder. In turn, the monster struggled and tried to grab the agent. Ghost was quicker and grabbed his knife, plunging it into the creature's eye, making a deep, wide tear down the side. Pus was practically exploded from the huge eye, and an open wound wide. Ghost quickly took a heavy grenade from his vest and plunged it into the eye. After he jumped away, the creature turned and raised its huge arm, its claws opening menacingly. But before he could even attack the man, the grenade exploded in its eye. Pus, blood, flesh of bones, and they were thrown everywhere by the explosion. However, resistant outside, and the inside was not. That all went for biological weapons. Well, all the ones he had faced so far. The creature fell. A cloud of red smoke with mixture of blood formed where it had been. Ghost covered his eyes with his arm and stared at a few moments at the monster's fallen body. He gasped a few times, feeling the pain of his injuries began to bother him. He hadn't fully recovered from his last mission. He was curious to say the least, given that his natural generation would already have taken effect, even without the herbal mix. And as if he had just remembered this, he opened one of the pockets of his ballistic vest, only to be frustratingly confronted with a broken bottle of herbal mixture. The liquid had soaked through his vest and was now dripping with his blood. Ghost grunted angrily. The bottle must have broken where the monster attacked him earlier. He would have to deal with it in the classic way. However, before he could do anything else, he heard the monster roar in front of him again. His keen eyes watched his tentacles emerge from the outside of his mutated arm and headed towards the remains of the senator. Lying not far from where they were, some other kinds headed towards the bodies of the lickers. Ghost realizing the intention behind it, he raised his rifle and fired at the tentacles. However, they were fast enough to avoid its bullets, although he did hit a few after the tentacles had been sexually retracted. The creature's body began to struggle. It was quite simple using mass to create mass. The explosion wound regenerated at a frightening speed, while the creature's body grew and mutated in front of him. Ghost shot whatever he could in the arm, in what was left of the head, in the place where the eye had regenerated. But it seemed to have more he shot, and the more monster mutated. Something like this, a huge arm, appeared on the creature's back. There were bones like spikes all over his strength, and a line of the small eyes that followed each other to the base of a huge bone spike at the end. Its legs began to grow, its tail seemed to get more robust, its mouth seems to get bigger, and its head expanded, growing at what seemed to be a malformed brain, resembling the head of the licker. Ghost gritted his teeth as he saw the creature's huge arms move, its body rising from the ground. "Get out of here!" he shouted loudly, firmly wanting the girl to get as far away from it as possible. It even got more dangerous, and what's worse, he was kind of obliged to kill the thing, otherwise there could be too many victims. "You're not serious. Come on, we could get together. The BSA already? Fucking hell, this is my job, girl!" he shouted back, irritated, firing more into the creature's eye, hitting it as hard as he could. The monster roared and attacked him with its tail, but the agent was quicker and dodged it, jumping over the attack. The creature advanced again, its huge body with difficulty in that tight spot. Sherry also fired the Desert Eagle, hitting of one of those eyes onto the creature's back, as soon as she could, until her gun ran out of bullets. The monster tried to pierce the agent, who dodged the attack and jumped away, feeling the wall being destroyed right behind him. The creature attacked him again, a slashing attack with huge claws on its back. The agent gritted his teeth and leaned back, dodging the attack and feeling the air being cut off just centimeters in front of his face. As he dodged, he grabbed the heavy grenade from his vest and threw it at the creature's feet. which it roared again, irritated as it tried to attack him once more. The grenade exploded, loud enough to throw the ancient backwards as he was too close. The creature roared and staggered a few steps, but soon recovered and advanced again against the agent, who rolled to the side, dodging the piercing attack. Sherry looked around nervously, looking for something she could use, a place where they could all escape. There was no way to kill that thing, not in that tiny place. The place looked like a sewer, but it wasn't exactly one. The bars around each corner were the walls that led to nowhere. There seemed to be an entrance other than the hole above them. The place looked like it hadn't been touched by anyone in years. Abandoned. In other words, in some kind of person. Most likely for what? She didn't even know, let alone why she was under the airport. She looked at the monster again, gasping as she saw the ancient grow narrowly avoid being crushed. Well, since there was no way out of there, she might as well help him. The girl picked up her knife and leapt towards the monster's back, plunging her knife into one of its eyes. Pus dripped from the wound, staining her eyes, clothes, and face. She grunted as she felt the creature jerk in an attempt to get it off its back. In response, she braced her legs under her, and she scaled the creature, plunging her knife into another eye just above. The monster roared and quickly approached the nearest wall. Realizing what it was up to, Sherry jumped to the side and staggered a little as she felt her whole place shake from the force of the impact. She quickly moved away from the creature, and her eyes widened slightly in surprise as she fell on her back, collided with the man right behind her. His deep blue eyes stared into hers. "You could have climbed out of there by now," he said, his tone scolding, to which it was serious to say the least. Why was he scolding her? However, despite this, she watched as the extending clips in her direction. Two of the weapons which she held. She quickly took the ammunition and reloaded both pistols she had. "I'll keep this attention on me. You can attack him from behind, understand?" he asked, also reloading his rifle and glaring at her. Sherry shook her head in response. Before doing anything else, Ghost alternated his gaze between Sherry and the two guns that she was also carrying. She felt a little more comfortable, seeing what she was at least armed. "Take good care of them, will you? They have a bit more firepower, so watch the recoil," she said. He said, referring to the weapons, and without waiting for an answer, advanced towards the monster, while Sherry watched him for a few moments, surprised and curious perhaps, at his attitude. The monster tied a horizontal attack on the agent, who dodged by crouching without releasing the trigger, unloading the clip into the creature's front eyes, which roared with each destroyed eye. Seeing the opportunity, Sherry ran to the opposite side and tried to shoot out the eyes on the creature's back. The eyes of the huge arm on its back focused on Sherry in one swift movement and attacked her. The girl dodges by throwing her torso to the side with the counterattacks with the point-blank shot into one of the eyes of its extension. The arm retracts slightly and attacks again, but Sherry is quicker and dodges, throwing her whole body into the step and firing again. The monsters roared loudly and raised both of its arms in front of the agent, who quickly moves away. The creature then hit the ground so hard that the whole place shook again, like an earthquake, making them both lose their balance. When their arm got in front of Sherry's, attacks her arms, causing her to drop the Desert Eagle to the ground. The girl grits her teeth and strikes back, turning her body as she stabs the knife into the eye of one of the arm, and jumps away as she sees the limbs reattract. She crouches down and picks up the weapon that had fallen. Her confused eyes looked at the creature. It wasn't trying to kill her, it was trying to disarm her. Earlier and now this, it was rather obvious that this creature didn't want to hurt her. But why? It was obvious that it wanted to kill the agent, so why not her? Her eyes narrowed slightly as she looked at the slight scars on her arms. Was it because she had once been infected with the G-virus? It didn't make sense. There was no way they did tests. She and Claire were then cured. Chris himself confirmed it. Maybe then it had something to do with the consequences of her being affected. It didn't matter, not at the moment. She reloaded her pistol and fired into the creature's eyes. taking a step closer with each shot she fired. The ancient rolled to the side, dodging the attack that would surely crush him. Just as he got up, the creature counterattacked him again with its other arm, in pure reflex as he leapt onto the side, at the same time turning his body around until he was still in midair, fired still in the creature's eyes, falling to the ground with his fingers on the trigger. The monster roared again, and the concrete beneath its feet began to crack, causing it to lose its balance for a few moments, just long enough for the ghost to stand up, separated the heavy grenades between both hands, and climbed up to the creature's huge arm. His eyes met Sherry's, and she threw 2 heavy grenades in her direction. The girl's eyes widened in surprise and put her gun to her waist, managing to both catch 2 grenades at the same time. "Put it in the eyes!" he shouted, and she obeyed him immediately. They both put the pins out of the grenades and put them in different eyes. Sherry moved away quickly, and Ghost jumped backwards, while throwing a stun grenade still in the air. The stun grenade exploded, and the creature roared and moved away, a few steps, not even having to think about attacking the ancient, before the grenades exploded at the same time. Again, no matter how strong the outside was, the inside would always still be the weakest point. An explosion of blood, flesh, and bones took place, so strong that the entire structure shook, and the ground beneath the creature's feet gave away, sending it trembling to the unknown. Both the ancient and Sherry covered their eyes and shielded themselves from the impact. A cloud of red smoke mixed with concrete debris and dust in the air for a few moments. The ancient stood up a little disoriented. No matter how much it happened, he never seemed to get used to it. After a few gasps of the pain and felt through his body, the weakness hit him. He had lost a fair amount of blood on his wound due to the side of his body, caused by the monster's claws. He sharpened his gaze as he heard the creature below them roared in exhaustion. A frustrated groan escaped his lips, and that thing just wouldn't die. However, it was another noise that caught his attention. A groan of pain from the other side of the room. His heart raced, and he quickly ran towards the moan, his eyes focused on the bone stake driven into the girl's stomach. "Girl!" he said, without realizing it, walking towards a brisk pace. Kneeling down beside her, it was lodged deep in the stomach. "What the fuck? You need a hospital," he said as he watched carefully as she put her hands around the stake. "Hey, no, leave it there." "It's okay. It will heal," she said, in the ancient's slightless confusion. Sherry gasped loudly as she pulled the stake out of her, and a groan of pain mixed with relief escaped her lips as she finally got rid of that thing. Ghost prepared to rip off a part of his tactical shirt, but his eyes stared in disbelief as the wound simply stopped bleeding. He stood there motionless as he watched the wound begin to heal right in front of him, until it closed completely, nothing left but a small scar, barely visible in the intensive eyes. Sherry gasped a few times and sat down, leaning her back against the wall. Her tired eyes even met with the agent's serious ones. Serious, surprised, and fearful? A smile appeared on her lips. That was usually the reaction. Well, at least, part of the few people who did see it. "I hope this doesn't make me kill me or something. You know I'm not infected. But it's complicated," she said, ducking her head for a moment. "It's complicated, yes, but Ghost knew exactly what she was talking about, so his suspicions were right. It did have side effects. He just couldn't tell if they were good or bad." "I won't ask then." That was all he said, and the girl watched him move a few steps to his side and sit down, also with his back against the wall. He was hurt, and she knew that his injuries had caught up with him. "Really? That's it?" She asked, watching cautiously as he pulled a small compartment from the side of the handle of his knife. A familiar liquid was present inside a small vial, a mixture of herbs. "Do you have any involvement with the creation of bioweapons?" he asked after drinking the small vial. It wouldn't do much, but the amount was too small. It was better than nothing. "What? No," Sherry said, watching him gasp as she took some bandages from his vest pockets. "Are you a bioterrorist, trying to end society as we all know it?" She grimaced. "No. Then why should I kill you?" He asked, opening the cap of the bottle and pouring the drink of liquid on the wound of his arm and the side of his torso. The pain was sharp but bearable. "That's what you do?" Fight bioweapons and bioterrorists? That sounds like a lot from like BSAA, she said, remaining silent for a few moments. But seeing that she wasn't going to get an answer, she stood up and walked over. Give me here, I'll do it. He looked at her for a few brief moments, looking uncertain, which made Sherry roll her eyes. Remember you said before, when you told me to get out of here because your job was fighting that thing? She asked as he sighed. Well, taking care of survivors in bioterrorist attack is my job. Now give me that. Ghost lowered his head and sighed once more, clicking his tongue shortly afterwards. Rolling his eyes in defeat, he hands the bandages to the girl, who kneels beside him. I have no idea how you managed to move like this with this injury, she said as more to herself than him, because she knew she wouldn't get an answer. A concern from her work, or at least tried to. Something caught her eye. After wiping away the excess blood, she realized that her arm was covered in scars, some deeper than others, but there were others too that brought back memories. Claw scars just below the shoulder, 3 claws, the middle one just being the wildest, and on this forearm, a bite mark. Both scars had been healed for years by the state, but she could just see them very well. And she certainly remembered someone who had the exact same marks a few years ago. She clearly remembered looking at the marks on his arm several times when he had his shirt off. She remembered the both horrible, visible, even underneath the shirt from its claws on its chest. And she remembered a bite mark from both that she and Claire agreed not to ask them about. Not soon after, anyway. She swallowed some saliva, shook her head, and hoped that she hadn't noticed her staring. She had no way of knowing if it really was. That man, from all the stories she had heard, from all the information she had, was fighting biological weapons on his own. Who knows what she'd been through. Scars sound like a common line of work. It did mean he'd survive another day of nightmare, considering the work he had worked alone. It would be just a coincidence. Just a coincidence. Ghost to HQ, come in. Her thoughts were interrupted by his thick voice, now no longer tired as before. The girl looked at his wounds that they were healing. Not as fast as her own generation, but faster than an ordinary person, which made her wonder if he had some kind of enhanced healing. Yes, Ghost? One infected with the variant of the G virus. I tried to kill it, but the creature regenerated completely, ingesting mass. The creature escaped, he reported. His tone of frustration were present in his voice. Sherry finished bandaging his wounds and knelt beside him, looking at him suggestively. We understand, Ghost. That thing is close to leaving the airport. The BSAA and TerraSave are already nearby, but considering the more mass it ingests, the more it mutates. I don't think we'll be able to do much. Ghost sighed and Sherry became a little bit more apprehensive. Perhaps Claire was even close to team. She knew that she could take care of herself, but just imaging Redfield coming into face with a creature like that, even more mutated than the consumption of mass, made for her stomach turn. Her attention was being drawn to Ghost, who reloaded his rifle and checked his equipment. Call the Reaper, prepare the G guns, and bring in supplies for refilling, he said, cracking the bones in his neck. From the way he acted, despite being frustrated, he seemed calm, frightening calm, much to Sherry's surprise and fear. Just thinking over the victims the creature would claim. The helicopter leaving in 5 minutes. Estimated time arrival, 13 minutes and 27 seconds. Ghost looked at Sherry, silently signaling her to recharge so she could. Good, in the meantime, I'll draw the creature to me, and try to reduce the number of victims. Ghost out. That was all he said just before turning to Sherry. Despite the mask, she knew that he was serious. His eyes showed enough. You'll just stay close to me at all times, and you'll move when I speak. You'll do as I say. Understand? As soon as we leave the airport, you go to your group and tell them to stay away, and let me do my job that's not negotiable. If anyone from TerraSafe or BSAA show up, I will kill them. His words were firm and harsh, making the girl feel a little coward. She had no doubt that he wanted to kill her in that moment. He would, but also had no doubt if he would actually do what he said, and she seemed to have enough to confirm it. Although it was against her will, she decided to nod in response. it would appear smarter to agree with him at the moment, to go against him, especially in this situation. Without saying another word, he had turned and walked over to the huge hole in the center of the site. He investigated the area below. The hole wasn't very big and lay there, and didn't seem to be anyone around. After signaling Sherry to stay there, he jumped down, raising his rifle and checking his surroundings. The place wasn't a sewer, but it looked more like the tunnels that connected the entire way to the Will Pharma. To his left was a trail of destruction, obvious path the creature had taken. Ghost signaled Sherry to get down, and as soon as she did, they followed behind the creature. The ancient in lead, and Sherry was 2 steps behind. The silver ghost raised and created a third path. There was a huge hole in the center that led underground, forming some kind of destroyed cave. They had followed it until they were at a huge part of ground that given away, and Ghost again jumped first. He landed on the abandoned area of the airport, the subway station that led nearby the parking lot, still inside the airport. They climbed the stairs until they were close to the lobby. The thing that they saw from where they were blood marks on the floor. There were pieces of flesh, bones, limbs, and severed heads everywhere. Ghost went for it impassively. It was just another part of the job, nothing he was already used to. But it was a different story with Sherry. She made a face of disgust, disbelief, and pity. Her stomach churned for a few moments, and she could even not breathe properly. A movement caught her eye, and a grunt of pain put her on alert. When her eyes were focused, she felt her throat close, and her body immediately moved towards the squirming on the floor. Lying next to a severed leg was Selena. Her stomach was punctured, blood covered, tears flowed from her eyes. Her despair was so great that she didn't seem to notice Sherry standing right next to her. Sherry couldn't exactly say anything. She just tore off the part of her shirt and tried to stop the bleeding. She was used to dealing with injuries, some uglier than others, but she still didn't have much field experiences. Usually the most experienced people dealt with some serious cases. It was one thing to receive clients' protected areas with average injuries. It was another one to see something like this happen in front of you, especially with such a young child. Even more was a part of her job. However, she wouldn't say it was too much of a shock. After all, she had survived Raccoon City, but she'd be lying if she said it wasn't incredibly frustrating and sad. She had no way of looking after that girl, not there without the equipment. Her brain refused to accept it. As an instant before her mind could process anything, she heard the sound of the gunshot, and the girl's body went still. Her eyes caught sight of the ancient right next to her. He had stared at the girl's body for a few moments, and then simply turned away. His actions were cold, as of something trivial. "What's wrong with you?" she said. Her voice was low in frustration, with some disbelief present in her voice. The ancient turned around, his cold eyes with a slightly curious gleam. "What? Would you rather see her suffer?" His cold voice sent shivers through down the girl's body. "It wasn't long ago that you saved her, not long that she was on our side, and now you're just cold, like you don't even care," she said. The frustration she felt herself betraying her thoughts and forcing the words out of her mouth. She didn't know exactly what she wanted. Maybe that would throw something. Maybe he would be frustrated with her. "Good, that means my training worked. Now if you're done with that, let's go. You can grieve later," he said, not wanting for an answer, and continued on his way. Sherry, for her part, swallowed some saliva, and her eyes then went to the girl's body. Now with the bullet hole in her head, she didn't want to leave her like that. The girl had survived only one nightmare, only to die in another. It wasn't fair. She clenched her fists in frustration. How could he be so cold? How could she be so distant? It felt like she was talking to a robot, something inanimate, devoid of feelings. Maybe it was for the best. Maybe it was good that he said the way he was. He had no idea that he was the way he was or what made him like that. Her legs began to move to reach the ancient. At the same time, her anger spread through her chest. Her mind recalled the words from a few moments ago. "You're an insensitive asshole." Her words didn't neglect any reaction from him as expected. "But I respect for what you do, especially for doing this kind of thing for a living alone. Instead, you're arresting these terrorists you killed them, don't you? Her question made him glance at her, although she kept her gaze forward. What do you want to ask me? He knew she would have to ask something. Maybe she would have at least expected it. You obviously know a whole lot you're skilled, well prepared for all those weapons. But still, you don't seem to be from any organization. Not BSAA, DSO. Oh, why? Who exactly are you? Who do you work for? Even though she probably knew he wouldn't answer her, she asked anyway. She couldn't understand why he didn't join the other organizations. He would have been a great ally for anyone. Ghost remained silent for a few moments, his mind working on an answer, wondering if he should answer at all. A sigh escaped his lips. You talk too much, was all after he said a while, drawing frustration grown from Sherry. Forget it, I said I shouldn't have asked. She then shook her head, in disapproval again before the agent glared at her. You work for a corrupted government. She looked at him, slightly surprised but curious. You work for the people who claim to be a bioterrorism, but you're just loyal customers on the black market. BSAA, DSO, FBC, TerraSafe, you're good just like little puppies, ignorant of all the real reasons of superiors, and for those who knew this, don't have the guts to do anything. Agent silence. Not us. While you are limited by the laws, human rights are dedicated by your controlling government. We do as what has to be done. We see the truth and we apply what they deserve, no matter how much what we have to do. You've already said too much. You say you're against Umbrella and you say you're against the bioterrorists, but you don't sacrifice what's necessary to defeat them. Think of it as this way. While the BSAA was involved in useless meetings, Veltro was buying off the authorities and increasing its experiments, while you're worrying about the enemy outside Lansdale was making deals with Jack Norman, the terrorist leader, while you or your little group are trying to convince the authorities in Africa to let you help the refugees. Because of an old intrigue of the country's corrupt government, people were dying for the lack of medical supplies. Shut up, Kennedy. A word of advice. He stopped walking and his cold, even though slightly angry eyes staring deep into Sherry's wounds. He stared deep at her fear, sadness, so much so that he didn't even notice his own mind calling out the name to sworn to bury. Go home. Get away from this place. This is life. It's not for you. He continued on his way, but she didn't. Sherry stared at the man's back with watery eyes. Her heart was pounding and her chest was heavy. What bothered her wasn't the harsh words. It was the fact that he was right and she had simply refused to see it before. She, like many others, had thought it was best to remain ignorant with the excuse that they couldn't get with their heads around the situations beyond their control. She thought that she was doing good by joining TerraSave. She thought that she could save more lives by moving up the ranks. And yes, she did, but she ignored much bigger problems. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't help everyone. But they could at least lessen the loss. And with her lowered she followed the agent. You're pathetic. Ghost forced himself to keep walking, following the trail of destruction. He had to focus on the roars coming from afar, tried to concentrate on the number of victims he would save if he hurried. Anything was rigid in his words. He didn't want her to follow his advice, to listen to the words, but at the same time he felt strange, a certain kind of fear that he didn't know exactly what it was. A fear he thought indicated away any chances of being afraid of anything. Part of him approved of the idea of Sherry helping other people, but another part was afraid of her getting too involved in these matters. Otherwise, the deal he had made years ago would be practically useless. There were still a few zombies in the area, not killed by any survivors or consumed by the monster, but he didn't seem to even care about them. He didn't have the time. As long as they didn't bother him, he wouldn't waste bullets on unnecessary things. Ahead was another hole. The creature had already left the airport. He saw the cars were overturned and destroyed, vehicles on fire, bodies laying on the ground, bullet castings scattered near military vehicles. The thing must have some advance in the mutation. He had to hurry. The G-gun would do the trick, but the more the creature mutated, the more victims it would have. He walked through the overturned cars, his eyes focused on the two zombies running towards him. With a worried sigh, he raised his rifle and fired at them both, speeding up the pace a little. "Sherry!" a voice stopped him. Shivers spread through his body and spine. Deep down, he had considered the possibility. He could just choose to ignore it. He hoped internally that, but that time, he had already taken Sherry to safety, and that he wouldn't have to take that risk. He turned to the side and saw a very familiar woman running towards the embrace of the blonde. She was wearing Terra-safe clothes, similar to Sherry's. She was a little dusty and a part of her pants were torn. It was clear that she was faced with the creature before. Despite the years, she hadn't changed much, and at the same time she looked different as fuck. He watched Claire hug the girl tightly. His heart beat a little faster as his mind screamed for him to act. He could turn around and leave before the two could notice him. He could even leave as he always did, silently and visibly. However, his body wouldn't obey. The last time he had glanced as how they looked was years ago. As a form of security, his mind had chosen to help bury them both deep in thought of his consciousness, and everything had been fine until that day. "Are you alright?" Claire asked, undoing the hug and holding Sherry's face with both hands. He heard Sherry say something, but he didn't pay that much attention to what it was. Until the next instant, they were both looking at his direction. He tightened his grip on his rifle and swallowed some saliva. He felt strange in front of their gazes. At first, he had tried to comfort himself by saying that the choice he had made was the heat of the moment, but it felt so good without saving the lives of two people. They didn't even need to leave such an impact on his life. After all, he already knew them for one night. And as it turned out, that was enough. He watched Sherry start to approach as he stiffened. His eyes tried to focus on the girl, and tried not to on the woman approaching the few steps behind. "Here are your weapons. Thank you, sir, for saving me." He analyzed a small smile on her lips, noticing the relief she felt, placing the rifle on his back. He picked up both his pistols and gave them a quick check, and then put them in his proper holsters. "Don't mention it," he said. Unable to control himself, he looked at Claire. His blue eyes met hers. To his dismay, he tried to react minimally, internally grateful that she would be seen underneath his mask. The creature roars and echoes again, along with the sound of destruction. It was enough to snap him back into reality, and with one last look at Sherry, he turned and ran towards the monster. Both were watching him walk away, until Claire put her hand on the girl's shoulder. "That's the guy Chris and Jill mentioned, isn't he?" she asked, and Sherry looked at her for a few moments. "Yes, he helped me get out of here." Claire then turned to face away the way he came. His heart was racing. She said, a few arched curious eyebrows as she saw Sherry just looking in the same direction. "We need to talk, but that's for later. Let's go." Sherry didn't react for a few moments, but then she nodded and turned, running towards Claire's side.